Realty, I'm Dale Bryant, and I'm a real estate broker with Royal LePage Pro Alliance Realty Brokerage. Yesterday we were able to see the unseeable as the world looked on to view the first ever photographed image of a black hole. It's been called the M87, which is sort of James Bondish, and is approximately 50 million light years from Earth. Another unseeable event will occur this evening around 7 p.m. when the Toronto Maple Leafs take the ice and will be playing in a playoff match for 2 years in a row. Another unforeseeable occurrence. Now in real estate, Realty provides you the looking glass to see, well, actually hear, useful tips, services, and events surrounding key real estate components of your home and the real estate in general of Northumberland County. So get ready, get set for your favorite local real estate forum. Thursday mornings at this time we talk about, and we interview guests on all things real estate with a direct focus on Northumberland County and the communities within it. This morning we will have Aaron Farrow. Aaron is a real estate sales representative with Royal LePage Pro Alliance Realty Brokerage. Aaron is a stager and a real estate investor, and he will be with us shortly, and Aaron will be giving us some inside information on how house flipping works and some tips to help you become successful in the art of real estate investment house flipping. Before we get into today's topics, let's see what's happening in the snapshot report for April 11, 2019. There have been 138 single-family residential sales over the past month, and that sales number just continues to rise during this 2019 spring market. It leaves us with an increasing inventory of 407 residential listings for sale. The average selling price of successful sales over the past year has risen to approximately $422,000. Now that's a notable number because it was just 2 weeks ago, and our average sale price when we averaged it out for a year was $417,000. So over 2 weeks it has risen $5,000, and it's risen in a 1 year average, so that's very substantial. During the past year, people have received on average approximately 98% of their list price in a market time of 46 days. Northumberland County, you are still in a seller's market with an absorption rate at approximately 34% based on the past month's sales trend. What that means is we have a residential home inventory that can satisfy approximately 3 months of sales at the rate homes have been selling. I research these Northumberland County statistics and calculate the absorption rate using information from CoreLogic's matrix system. Now, if you're going on your computer to look for CoreLogic's matrix system, you might find it, but you won't be able to get access to it because it is the realtor component of the MLS system. So if you're thinking of buying or selling a home in the near future, you'll want this kind of information we just did in Snapshot, but you'll want it to be area specific to the property type you're dealing with and the price band it's in. And how do you get that information? Well, you talk to your local realtor because they're going to be able to get the information that you need that's most relevant to you. Today's mortgage rates. Mortgage rates have come down again. A 5-year fixed is as low as 2.99% and a 5-year variable as low as 2.75%. And as always, some conditions do apply. Today's mortgage rates, they come to us from mortgage broker Carol Ann Bryant with Dominion Lending Centers Alliance. Here is a date you're going to want to put in your calendar, and the date is Saturday, June 8th, 2019, and the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, we often refer to it as the ACO, Cobourg and East Northumberland. They're excited to present their house tour, and they're going to have 8 amazing properties in Brighton, Colborne, and Grafton for tour. And this house tour is, as I said, on Saturday, June 8th, and it will run from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. The homes will range in age from 1840s to 2000s, and they all will have some sort of unique architectural feature and interior design. Tickets will be $30, and you'll be able to purchase them from Lighthouse Books in Brighton, Downey Pharmacy in Colborne, and 1812 Antiques in Grafton. Or I'll give you a number here and that you can call for tickets, and the number is 289-435-2015. And if you miss that, we'll be repeating this notice again right up until June 8th for the event. That, folks, is a current snapshot of the residential real estate market and the events in Northumberland County. I'd just like to remind everyone that the views and opinions expressed on Realty or any of the articles presented do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the station, of the Northumberland Hills Association of Realtors, or any real estate brokerage or realtor. They're simply our views and opinions at this time. As I mentioned at the top of the show, our guest today is here to address a topic we've never addressed yet on Realty, so it's long overdue. And we have with us a sales representative for real estate at Royal LePage. And here in town, we have here a stager, and we have here a real estate investor who has a lot of experience in flipping investment homes. And no, it's not three people, it's one person, and it's Aaron Farrow. And good morning, Aaron, and thank you for joining us here.
Hi, Dale. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, pretty excited about this. Having somebody here with me in the studio who has experience on home flipping, I just think it's just gold in this topic, because there's a lot of people who think about it, and it's a mystery, and it's a mystery for a reason, not because you open the door and it's all easy peasy. It's a mystery for good reason. So fantastic. I thank you for offering to do this and giving away some secrets.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Aaron, first thing people are going to want to know is if they're about to listen to us for a show or two, because you said if it carries into a second show, you're good with that?
Yeah, not a problem. I think there's a lot that we can cover. I think there's a lot of detail that goes into flipping homes and investing in general.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely, one side of it is doing the flip itself and the work, but before that, there's a whole other side just to setting up the deal, financing the deal, and projecting your numbers. So I think there's a lot we can cover.
Perfect. So, folks, it looks like we have a two-part series here on the art of the real estate investment home flip. But people want to know a little bit about yourself, what qualifies you to come on here on such a epic, prestigious real estate show such as Realty and talk about this. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, it's the first time I'm hearing that there's this much pressure today, but I'll give it my best shot. No, I guess go back about 5 years. I was just about finishing high school here in Coburg,
Mm-hmm.
at secondary school, and all my friends were going off to university, but a good friend of mine's father was working as a foreman out in Fort McMurray on the oil sands.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of set aside university temporarily, and I said, I'll go out there, make some money, figure everything out, and gain a good experience. As I was out there, I had started saving up money, and after about 2 years, I said, okay, well, I have this money saved up. Let's consider buying a home. It's the best place to put your money, in my opinion. And I was looking at it at the time, I didn't really need a place for myself, because when we're out there, we're working 20 days, fly home for 8 days off, and then fly back again. So I was looking to get into investment properties. My first thought was to get into rentals.
Mm-hmm.
But here I was, 19 years old, and seeing the return on rentals, and I'm like, this is a bit too slow for me right now. I wanted to build some equity kind of quick.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'd been doing trades out there. I started as a laborer and then got into doing carpentry. My father was always very handy, so I'd been around it. And I thought, let's give flipping homes a try. And I think, like you touched on, that's the biggest thing for people is pulling that trigger, because it's a risk.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at first the best thing you can do is just make it a calculated risk.
Mm-hmm.
So we were shopping around for homes, and looking back on it now, I probably made the first mistake that anyone can make.
Which was?
Getting emotional.
Okay, and we'll cover that later, right?
For sure, we will.
Talk about
But,
things not to do.
yeah, definitely. But what I was doing was I was going around to every house thinking, oh, this is perfect. This can be a flip. This will work. And throwing in an offer on the first 2 places that I actually saw.
Yeah.
Lucky for me, they didn't go through. We didn't get them. But I ended up finding a house here in Coburg that was a perfect start, and that was kind of the beginning of it all.
So, I mean, it's not like you just learned through academics. You've been doing this and maybe made mistakes and had success, and that's the best way to learn.
Yeah, I think especially with flipping, it's such a hands-on practice. There's so many variables to it that it can be tough to just read the books, and obviously it's important to gain as much knowledge as you can, but like most lessons, the best lessons are learned the hard way.
Exactly. And Aaron, you're a stager. Tell us a little bit about that.
So as we were flipping these homes, actually the first flip, I had left a little bit of money in the budget for staging. And my mother at the time, who had always had a great design eye, we said, go forward with this and take this and see what we can do. And I think at the time, before we had listed it, we were looking to sell around $319. This was back in 2015. And we staged the home, and we ended up listing at $334 and getting $333. And I credit that, very much so to the value of the staging in the home. And so that was kind of like an eye-opener, like, wow, credit to my mother, you're very talented at this.
Yeah.
And so that also, too, same for my real estate as well, the flips were the early transition into getting the staging company started and then eventually getting my license as well.
So you're in business with your mom.
Yes.
It's a family business, and you folks do staging. What's the name of the staging company?
It's called Staged Interiors. So the company has been up for a little over a year and a half, but as we've worked through it, every job, we've tried to grow our inventory as much as possible so that we have our own inventory in-house. So if things are needed quickly or with urgency, we can help support that.
That's fantastic, and I've talked about with different guests about staging a number of times over the years here on the show, and I absolutely agree. Staging is a crucial component of selling your home. And now you're here with Royal LePage, working out of the same office that I'm working out of here in the mall in Coburg, and yeah, it's fantastic having you part of the brokerage.
Yeah, it's been great.
So, a little bit about you and the way you grew into the flip and then growing after the flip. Who would you say is a good candidate for buying an investment flip?
I think if you're someone that's considering getting into it, I think there's a multitude of variables that will help you, but I don't think you need to have all of them. I would say someone that obviously, if you're handy and you can do a good portion of the work yourself, that's going to be very helpful to you. The majority of the construction costs come with the labor, not the material. So if you can remove any of those costs by doing the work yourself, that's very helpful. I think it's important that, because it is a calculated risk, you don't ever want to overextend yourself. You don't want to take everything you have saved and invest it in the property. I think you want to have savings and maybe other income streams available to help support the investment while it's going on. And
you're referring to if that's your only income?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like if you're able to manage it while maybe having another job on the side, your main job primarily, and spend your evenings addressing the flip, I think that's the safest way to get into it when you start. Just because the risk that's associated with it, it can be a lot to just jump into with no escape plan.
Interesting, and we'll talk about return on investment a little bit later, but you're hinting towards, when you start, you're hinting towards that could just be your occupation, your career is flipping. So you've seen returns decent enough to think that.
Absolutely. It all kind of, when you start, it's always good to start with just taking on one, but a lot of people that do this, they'll eventually scale their business in a way where they'll have crews working for them, they'll have multiple properties at a time, and it becomes a full business.
Yeah, for sure, and then have to also have the time to search for a home.
Searching for the home, especially in this market.
Oh yeah.
Whether it's because there is a spotlight here as well in affordability for buyers coming from Durham, but typically when you're looking to buy homes, even in Northumberland, the price point that you're looking at, you're also competing with first-time home buyers. It's affordable to most people, so you have to be very active in your search. It also boils down to having a good realtor. A realtor that can quickly inform you on the property being listed so you can get there as soon as possible, because the last thing you want is to get into a multiple offer situation. You're going to be competing with an individual that is an emotional buyer. They're not going to flip the property, you are, so you have to be calculated. Whereas for them, they just want to get in, this is their first home, they're emotional and excited, they'll maybe overpay.
Yeah, for sure. And so a good realtor, you mentioned, that can make you aware of these properties ASAP, and I would say that that's likely most often an automated search where the client is notified at the same time as the realtors are notified. Because if you wait for realtor.ca, you're up to 24 hours later to see that listing. So yeah, value of a good realtor is very important. And then the other part of the good realtor, I would say, is being able to get you information on the values in that neighborhood and comparable properties to try and get a vision of what the potential is.
I think that's huge. I think it's also huge to have a realtor that can help you with a lot of the details throughout the process. I think of rural properties, for example, where it's really important, if you're going to make that investment in a rural property, to know the status of the septic. Because if you have a septic tank that isn't in good condition, that can really affect your margins. Or informing you and leading you down a path where you can find out the history of a property that's had additions. Were they permitted? Were they not? Because you don't want to be working with a property that you're trying to renovate, but it was also just thrown together. I think it's super important to have a realtor on your side that can lead you through that process.
So, in this flipping, what do you like most about it? Aside from the return on investment, aside from the income.
My favorite thing, which is it's the flip side to real estate. Every single day when you go into a flip and you're working on that property, you're seeing progress, right? You're seeing results every single day. There's some sort of intrinsic reward to that. You feel very accomplished, and that's an exciting process. I also love the design side of it. I'm very, very passionate about home design, the transformation process. In a way, it can become addicting because it is so exciting.
Yeah, it's instant gratification for the work you're doing, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, and so now when you say the transformation you can see in any given day, you're talking about being hands-on. You're talking about getting dirty and doing the work. For somebody listening and saying, you know what, I just don't have those dynamics in my life that I could do that, I would need to be someone who hires people to do the work, and maybe the transformation they see is they drop in the morning and they drop in later on in the day. Is that even a realistic outlook, or if you're not doing the work, is that just an impossible thing to do?
I think learning the work is important to understand the components of a home, but a lot of individuals that I see, whether I'm watching other Bigger Pockets podcasts or other podcasts with people that are doing this full time, they've scaled their business in a way that they're doing so many properties at a time that they no longer are able to do the work. So if you can't do the construction, I don't think that breaks the deal. I think the people that are very successful and have gotten there have scaled their business in a way that they don't have to, and they can just focus on the deal versus deal basis.
So it'd be important then, and this is a tough thing for anybody in business, is getting the right people.
Yeah, and that's kind of the $1 million question on how do you find that. But really, as you do work through that process, the first thing you're going to need to find is just a really good general contractor. Someone that can oversee the jobs, make sure the timelines are staying on schedule, the budget's being managed. But finding the workers, that's the challenge.
So, Aaron, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to be talking about return on investment and what people can expect to, or what people should expect to make in a real estate investment flip. But first, we're going to take a break. People, you've been listening to Realty on Northumberland 89.7 FM's Truly Local Radio. Join us for some more real estate talk after this break, and we're going to be looking at return on investment with a real estate home flip.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Heiser. I'm the host of Happy Hour. It's a show about...
Good?
Good, great. How was that fun?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
That's good.
There you go. Put you in the hot seat right away.
Way to amp it up. We've never done this before. Extremely experienced. Yeah.
You've done it.
Yeah.
How many people have done it? Period.
That's true. That's true.
Period.
Fair point. Fair point.
And you've done it successfully.
Yep. Yeah.
So, and that's going to be on.
Hello.
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 I'm not here.
Okay, perfect. And let's just move this so it doesn't
Hey, you know what? As you
knock
work
over.
through this, I mean, 20 minutes, we've only, am I talking too much? 'Cause we've only
No.
established a few questions, or that will lead well into the second
It's
series.
perfect.
Sorry,
We are actually,
Is
yeah,
that where
just
you estimated the schedule?
pretty close, yeah. 20 seconds.
Perfect.
Bestsellers include ceramics and jewelry. Staffed by knowledgeable volunteers, all profits will assist Northumberland's 89.7 in publicizing the arts. Northumberland
10.
Arts, just 2 doors north of the Capitol Theater, adjacent to Dreamers Cafe, open Thursday through Saturday.
3,
11 to 5,
2,
7 to
1.
News-
Welcome back. This is Northumberland 89.7 FM's Reality Realty with Dale Bryant, and our guest today is Aaron Farrow, and Aaron is a realtor here in town. Aaron is a real estate investor and is part of a staging company, family business, and Aaron is helping us with understanding the real estate investment flip. So if you've ever thought about investing in real estate to fix up a home and sell it, this is a show you should be listening to. If maybe you're not thinking about it, but you're just curious about it, this is a show you should be listening to. And I'd like to also say, if you have no intention of it, and you couldn't care less about real estate flipping, but you live in a home, or you own a home, there's a lot of things we're going to be talking about that amounts to creating value in your home, and making the home you live in more valuable and more enjoyable to live in. So you should still be listening to the show. And if you're hearing these words, you are. So before the break, Aaron, we were talking about a few things. We were talking about who could be good candidates for a real estate flip. We were talking about what you personally like most about doing this. And one of the things I'd like to point out, and folks might be able to see this later, we're taping today's show. First time I've ever taped the show on video, so we're thinking maybe in the future you'll be able to see this show online, and the antics that maybe go on during the commercial breaks, and a little bit of back scene inside stuff. So yeah, I'll let people know more about that as that unfolds. But we mentioned that you were going to talk about return on investment, Aaron. And what would it be a decent return on investment, or is there a minimum return on investment before you should even get involved?
Well, I think when you're asking what's the minimum, that's obviously going to be subjective to everyone. Everyone has their own goals that they want to earn out of the flip based on the work that they feel that they're going to do. For me, if we're looking at a percentage, about 15% ROI is fair, and that's usually going to come in around 25 to 45,000 is where you should aim to be. Now,
in our market.
in our market.
Yeah.
Now, it may be a little slimmer now than it was, but in and around there is where I would like to see myself usually set the goal for a flip.
Yeah.
Now, the one misconception that comes with ROI is a lot of people, and there is situations where this happens, where people will hit a home run flip where it's
Yeah.
$100,000 and it's a change your life flip and you've made a ton of money on it.
Yeah.
They do exist. There are opportunities where that can happen, but however, the flip side of that is that usually
The flip side?
pun intended. The flip side of that is usually that it creates the need for an extensive budget, a lot of time, and the biggest thing is when it takes that much time for that home run flip to hit those heavy margins, the market could change, and then everything has changed.
Yeah, your plan. Yeah, the rug just got taken out from under your feet with your plan, right?
Absolutely.
Or it got better.
Well, if it changes up for the better, then you're laughing.
Yeah. So a 15%, you said, is what you're looking for, and how long would you suggest that a person should take to get to that place where you purchase, it closes, and before that's ready to sell?
From experience, I would think that 3 to 4 months should be the goal timeline that you set for yourself. I think the real bread and butter of flipping real estate is the smaller jobs on a smaller scale that are in and out, where not as many variables come into play. Your 3-4 months to lower your carrying costs, and then you take your profits and you move on to the next project. I think volume is important for people that scale properly and end up making a very successful flipping business. They don't look for the home run. They look to scale their business in a way that they're doing mass volume.
And folks, I just like to remind you, Aaron is someone who's done it and done it successfully. There's people who try it and it doesn't go so well, this is all golden advice here. When we talk about time, Aaron, to do the flip, and you're saying, you know what, 3-4 months, you're referring to a flip where you've bought it and you're going to work on it. You live somewhere else. But then there's also the flip where somebody buys the home, they live in it, they work on it while they live in it, and then once the work's done, then it goes up for sale. Tell me a bit about the differences there and benefits and drawbacks of each one.
Sure. I have lived in a flip, and I've also had flips where I'm not living in the property. The first thing I would say is when you're living in the flip, obviously the productivity is much higher. I mean, there were some times where it's 3 in the morning and I'm putting down hardwood floor and the air compressor's covered in blankets to mute the noise.
Yeah.
and that goes with it. But on the flip side, again, you can't escape that. Like mentally, it can become quite a bit because every day you're waking up and all you're seeing is the work that you have to do.
Yeah, you're living in your job.
Exactly, which can be tough, can be really tough. However, when you're not at a flip and not living there is other things as well. There's, risks of things that happen when no one's at the property, vandalism, anything like that. Not like it's a major concern, but there's risks to that as well.
Right, and then there's some people maybe that are doing the flip and they have a timeline of a year or two. To living in it for a year or two, and the pace isn't 3 o'clock in the morning punching down boards,
Of course.
but it's the odd evening and their weekends, and it becomes their hobby even.
For sure, and I think that's great. I think especially too, if you're a first-time home buyer or you're younger as well, and maybe your life hasn't got as busy with kids or anything like that yet. My advice is always use the term flipping to yourself, which is a great term that I learned about at a Keyspire event with Scott McGilvery.
Mm-hmm.
And it basically talks about if you do the work but you do it over a prolonged period while living in the house, you have the benefit of not carrying a second mortgage or a second property.
Mm-hmm.
You have the benefit of maybe some tax not being as steep if you carry the property for a certain amount of time as a primary residence. Maybe capital gains doesn't come into play after 2 years. To some extent, I mean, it's always going to be submitted since the new rules, but
if you're repeating this, even if you're over 2 years, and CRA finds out that you make anywhere from 40,000 to 100,000 on your home every even 3 or 4 years, so there's always a chance somebody's scratching their head and wants to take a closer look.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. The one thing I would advise, if you are going to do it and live in it, it's really important not to start flipping the house for yourself, where you start making design decisions because you're living in the home and they start to leverage, how it's going to look because you're making it personal.
Yeah, which is one of the first things in the show you said the mistake you made at first is maybe making things too personal.
Of course.
So an easy thing to get caught up in.
Certainly. You see something on Pinterest one night and you're like, I love this, let's put this in. But really, are you getting the value out of it? And is it appealing to the masses, or is it just a personal trend that you like?
So if you have a heart and any passion, be careful as a flipper.
Stay cold. Stay
Yeah,
cold.
yeah. Best areas in a house to renovate. We always see things on in media about kitchens and bath
Of course.
and ROI on that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, of course, I mean, kitchen and bathrooms are always components of a renovation that add a lot of value. But there's a few other investments that, on a smaller scale, that I think really, really help. Garage doors.
Mm-hmm.
You can find modern California-style garage doors for $3,500, and that's going to transform the exterior. It's going to look like a superb house of high quality, but you've just gotten fancy with the garage doors.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is a simple upgrade in the kitchen. If you have one of those modern wall-mounted hood vents over your range, that's only a few $100 upgrade from a traditional range vent, but it adds all the difference in detail.
It's what people are looking for today.
Of course, and oftentimes I even find if I'm taking buyers through a property, when they leave the property, they'll usually leave the property with 2 or 3 design elements that they really liked, that really stood out to them. I think it's important not to go overboard on incorporating these design elements, but do it in places of the home that are an individual upgrade that isn't too expensive, that really shows well. Feature walls are a fantastic example. Wallpaper, textured wallpaper has really come back and adds a nice touch. Obviously, barnwood walls were very popular and have been over the past few years. These little elements, they add a little bit of pop to the house that maybe separates it from what you're seeing in a builder's grade home. Nothing against builder's grade homes, of course.
Yep.
But you don't have the benefit when you're flipping a home to say this is a brand new home. So you have to set the home apart in some way.
And one of the things that I think about and talk about to people is the landscaping, is the exterior. I mean, for a few reasons. Well, I had a guest on a couple of years ago, a landscaper, and doing my homework for the show, and return on investment. And this is assuming that you're getting people to do it, not necessarily like you're talking about where you get very involved yourself, but they were talking about kitchens and bath. If you're paying somebody, it might only be 75 cents on a dollar because you're paying professionals to do it all. But with landscaping, they were talking about anywhere from 200 to 1,000%, or cents on your dollar, 200 to 1,000 cents on your dollar. What do you think about landscaping?
Well,
and outdoor space.
To even add to that point, especially landscaping in the front of the house, I think when you're selling a property, the first 6 feet of the home, that first impression is really, really important. In a way, I feel like it sometimes sets the tone for the showing. Positive or negative, are you impressed or disappointed from what the pictures look like online? I think when you're coming up to a home and it's landscaped well into the entrance, you have a great first 6 feet in the foyer. I think even when you get to the point of selling the home, the numbers aside and that value that it's added, I think it's really important in creating that emotional attachment that buyers have to the home, with the hopes that they carry that through the rest of the showing.
And if the first 6 feet, as you mentioned, the curb appeal and the first 6 feet in the home are that appealing and the rest of the home doesn't quite live up, it's also the last 6 feet and the curb appeal that they're looking at as they look over their shoulder and driving away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And even landscaping into the backyard, everyone likes to have their own outdoor space as well that is really done up. And for the cost, like you had mentioned, of the labor associated with landscaping versus the carpentry labor that you may pay on a custom kitchen, there's a big difference there in the price.
Well, a few things I think about when I think of that curb appeal and that landscaping also is some architecture, is fairly flat. It's maybe not super detailed as far as roof lines and creating interest in depth. But if your home doesn't have that interesting architectural depth, do that from the curb with trees, with bushes, and I don't mean the garden that's right under the living room window that's flat, you know, as flat as the house. I mean, bring things out 5, 6 feet, 10 feet, and create an interesting depth in and out.
Totally agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree.
And then I think about return on investment with a lawn that's, you know, sort of shabby. It's bumpy.
Mhm.
It's full of weeds.
Mhm.
How much does that cost really to, you know, clean up
Right.
and tidy up, pruning?
Yeah.
Bushes and trees, and how much time does that actually take before it's like manicured?
Right, and really too, I don't think you have to be a professional to get good results from that. You know, if you don't want to be too involved in the flip, there is still always going to be areas of the flip that you can do the work yourself, and I think that would be one of them for sure.
And then you mentioned that as far as the outdoor space, you maybe have an 1,800 square foot home, but you have a deck, and it's not just a deck, but you somehow turn it into what people more consider exterior living space, and they can picture having their family and their friends there, because maybe you even put some wall art up on the back of the house, and you created, you know, with the barbecue and different settings, you made that 1,800 square feet or whatever seem like more, because everybody's picturing
Right.
being outside as much or more than inside.
Right, because the space carries through. It carries beyond just the home. And I mean, it ties into, you know, a lot of what selling real estate is, you know, taking away, you know, you always hear about decluttering, you know, personal pictures and things like that. You're just allowing people to envision themselves living in this home and feeling like this can be a place to, you know, raise their family or whatever it may be.
What about basements? If you come across a basement and it's unfinished, what do you think the return is to finish a basement? Or a basement finished poorly, you know, like
Yeah.
back in the 70s or 80s, and it's got paneling.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if the paneling's throughout the whole house, I'm in awe. I'm like, this is absolutely perfect. This is exactly what I want to see. This is gold. Basements are funny because everyone with basements it is subjective with what people want to do to their basement. Some people need extra bedrooms down there. Some people just want a very large entertainment space. There's been properties before where the basement was very dated, but the house didn't accommodate the full budget to redo both levels. So the basement was just cleaned up, taken back to the studs, and left vacant for someone else to finish. And that was a solution as well. I would say depending on where the state of the basement is, because a lot of basements are DIY, you don't necessarily know the quality of work that has happened, especially in basements. I think you have to take each house as its own job and assess how severe it may be down there. If you have a lot of costs with refinishing it, I think there is other areas of the house where you should prioritize your budget before getting to the basement.
So in that case, where you just, you know, take off that do-it-yourself for paneling, because the money is better spent on the main floor, what do you think that does a cement basement floor deserve a coat of paint? Are you going to do more than just rip up? Are you going to finish it in any way?
I would definitely have it clean. Like, you just want it clean down there. If there is, for example, a big thing is hanging electrical wires. If you've got anything like that, just tack them to the studs, pin them back, organize everything. A fresh coat of paint on the basement floor goes a long way, too. And even if it's just simply framing in and drywalling some of the exterior walls, I think that can be a great solution with low cost.
So personal rules. You've developed your own personal rules that you're going to follow on a flip. And you've already mentioned one.
I mentioned one. Never get emotional.
Never get emotional. Do you have any others?
I do. One important rule that a lot of people will say is remember that you make your money on the buy.
So what do you mean when you say that?
So when I say that is when you have a property and you know you have to put a certain amount of dollars into it, and the ARV, which is the after repair value, is going to be this, typically that budget and that resale that you're going to list for, it's not really going to change. The only figure that you really can dictate is the purchase price. So when I say you make your money on the buy, it ties in hand with not getting emotional. Because if you get emotional and feel like you have to have the property, you're going to overspend to get it, and in turn, you're going to hurt your margins. So it's important to remember that you make your money on the buy, and you have to stick to your numbers.
So that's going to first thing that comes to my mind when you say that, that's requiring some patience.
It is. You have to just tell yourself there is always another property.
Yeah,
that's the hard part for a lot of people, even myself.
Yeah. And
Time after time.
That's great advice for anyone, even somebody buying the home that they're just going to live in. I mean, it's such an emotional business we're in, and I often will say to clients, you know what, it's not the last good house we're going to run across, whether you're flipping or just buying to live in.
Yeah, it's almost universal for anyone buying, because that value that house is going to resell for, it's pretty well a set number based off where the market is. Another rule I have is always tack on 10% to your estimated rental budget, because I've yet to do a flip that hasn't gone over your expected budget. It's just part of it. Things come up.
You discover things as you're tearing down a wall.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, perfect story is on one of the last flips. It was in Coburg down by the water, and we had to do a new AC unit, but the AC wasn't in yet. In summer, it was so hot in the house, and we're drywalling the upstairs. We're doing about a 24 by 20 foot master suite that we're trying to create. But there's two big windows right at the front, so I'm like, I have to get some air in here. Like, I can't breathe.
Yeah.
So I open the windows, and what happens? A massive gust of wind comes in. It catches the old vapor barrier on the ceiling and drops the entire ceiling. I had never budgeted to have to redo the whole ceiling, the vapor barrier, everything with it. But these are things that will happen.
Yeah. If it can go wrong, it sometimes will go wrong.
Of course.
So, go ahead.
Well, one other thing that I think is really important is have an exit strategy. So, a lot of people that maybe are thinking of doing a flip, it'll never cross their mind to have an exit strategy, but that is so important. What happens if the house doesn't sell and you are maybe have a hard money loan to finance the property, and your only way to get rid of the property is to sell it? You have to have an exit strategy, whether you're buying a house where if everything doesn't go as planned, you can rent it out to cover those carrying costs and carry it for a few years to mitigate the damage. But if your only option is to get out of the property by selling it, there's a lot of times where maybe a certain house isn't selling for whatever reason, and the debt is quickly piling up.
Yeah, markets can change.
Absolutely.
So many things. Yeah, yeah. So great advice. I mean, yeah, have a plan B, which is the exit strategy, right?
Of course.
B,
Of course.
B, and maybe even C. All right, Aaron. Well, we're at our next break, but before we go, I just want to mention that an interesting thing you said about, as you tear the place apart, you might see things that come up, and that brings me to a thought about buyer beware. And we're going to cover buyer beware on a flip, and even as a buyer of a flip right after this break.
Celebrating our 5th year of service to Northumberland County. We're Northumberland
So
89.7,
we're
truly local radio.
going slower,
Okay.
which I have never had a problem with, especially when you say you're willing to come back. And so then
Is there certain points you want to at least get addressed today? Or no, you're good with the flow?
Whatever it is, that's how I like to be. If you were here one day, then it'd be like, I would ask you, what are your priorities that you want to mention?
But even if we finish like halfway through, that's no problem.
And if at the end of next week, if all of a sudden we said, we got 2 more we could do.
I don't mind. I enjoy this.
Okay. All right, so you read my buyer beware thoughts, right?
I did. I had some ideas.
And
what I do is I always take photos of everything behind the walls, which is so like.
I've never seen that done.
But if you have a portfolio that's sitting on the counter similar to a pre-list home inspection.
Yeah. Welcome back. This is Realty on Northumberland 89.7 FM, local real estate talk. I'm here with Aaron Farrow, and Aaron is a real estate investor. He has done a number of successful house flips. He's real estate sales representative with Royal LePage Pro Alliance Realty Brokerage, and part of a family business, a staging company. And Aaron, remind me, the staging company's name?
Staged Interiors.
Staged Interiors. Dale should be able to get that. Yeah, just a little bit of, after 2 or 3 times, I usually catch on.
That's okay. Next week we'll have it down.
Yeah, and so we were talking before the break, Aaron, about when the money sometimes that you have to allocate, and you recommend add 10% to a rental budget.
Yes.
Because things happen, you discover things, and so that makes me think about something that when I'm working with buyers and we're going through a home, and we know it's a flip, because I can see as a realtor, that house just got purchased 6 months ago or a year ago,
Right.
or
X
whatever,
price.
at a low value, and now all of a sudden it's looking completely different, and they're asking 100,000 more or 200,000 more, and it's gorgeous. But I always say, hey folks, let's go in this house with eyes wide open, because this was a flip, and we don't know if that person took off some walls, saw some mold, and just said, you know what, don't worry about it, we're just covering it up, and with the beautiful finish and trim, and nobody's going to know the evils that lie beneath that beautiful
Behind the walls.
behind the walls. So when you hear this, so this is me saying this as a realtor representing buyers, which you do as well. But what do you say as a flipper? What are your thoughts when I say something like that?
Well, I mean, as a realtor, I would say the same thing. As a flipper, there is a stigma associated with it, because of course at times there probably have been nightmares that have happened and things weren't taken care of, and it was a bit of lipstick, and there's underlying issues. Some solutions I've tried to come up with just to have the buyer have confidence in the property. I think it's really easy. Just take pictures of the work as you're moving along. If you're redoing siding, show that it was restrapped underneath, or if you're framing in walls, take a picture of the new vapor barrier and the new insulation in between the studs before the drywall is put on. Things like that. I think if you just document the process the way through, and ultimately you have to have a conscience when you do it, to an extent that your result and your product is going to be associated with you. So after a few flips, if you're doing shoddy work or letting things squeeze by, you can kind of get pigeonholed into doing poor work, and if that's what you become known as doing, well then you have a bigger problem, because now your properties are sitting and you can't get the property sold.
Especially in a small community.
Especially in a small community.
Where people talk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you can flip with the conscience.
Yeah, I think, and if I step back out of a flipper and as a real estate agent on the other side of it, if I'm going into a property that has a flip, the first thing I want to know is, did they invest any money in doing the major mechanicals? Because those are areas of the home where maybe the return isn't as high. The money didn't need to be spent there to maybe have the house looking a certain way to get a certain price. If I go into a property and I've seen that the major mechanicals are done, maybe it's a rural property and they've installed a UV light, things like that, that gives me a good impression of the quality of the work that was done. I always like to look at baseboards as well.
So if you're impressing more than the real estate photographer, if you're actually impressing the home inspector, Mr. Dave Smith,
that's right.
If he's giving some thumbs up, that's a decent sign that you're dealing with the right flipper.
Yeah, I just basically try and do my flip so that they please Dave Smith, and I know I'm in a good position.
Yeah, exactly. And and that idea you had, I've obviously seen homes that people photographed as they were building on a new build. But I'm not saying it doesn't exist other than you, but as many flips as I've been in, I've never actually seen on display the progress of the flip, and that's a beautiful idea, because that's like full disclosure out there, and what a lot of confidence you can incorporate in in a flip like that.
And you're already under the microscope if you're doing a flip. Everyone knows that it was, so everyone, like you said, eyes open, everyone's already going to be even more critical. I think the best thing you can do is have that portfolio documenting the work that you've done throughout the process on the table right beside a pre-list home inspection, and that shows full confidence in your product.
And that's something I noticed that you do. I had a buyer that recently purchased one of your sales, and I mean I do that. I pre-inspect a home and offer it up to. I usually do mine electronically. If the realtor has a buyer interested, I'll send it electronically. You had it right there out on display in a binder, and what a great idea. Those pre-inspection reports.
I agree.
Yeah. Once again, it's disclosure from a third party.
Exactly.
And,
unbiased.
Yeah, I love that. So when you see this home, you're shopping around as an investment flipper, and you're looking at homes. What are some key points when you say, am I going to make an offer on this or not?
Right.
What are you thinking?
Well, before you get into the numbers alone, when you're just looking at it and you're scouting whether to go take a look or not, I want to look for a few things. I want to look at what's the days on market for properties in that area. Is it a popular area? I want to look at recent sales in the area, of course, all things that the realtor will help you with. But when I'm really dissecting the recent sales in the area, one thing I'm looking to do is, if I've established my ARV, my after resale value, where I'm estimating the property is going to be, if I reach this price in this neighborhood, am I going to be the first to do it? Am I going to be trying to break the ceiling getting this price? If I am, I don't think it's going to work. I think you want to stay within the median average there for price. That's one thing that I'm going to look at. Obviously, the work that has to be done. I know that if a property has major mechanical issues and also needs a lot of cosmetic work, there could be too many variables along all of that process that are hidden costs that are going to tack onto the budget. So calculated risk obviously comes into play. Time it will take to do the property. I don't really like to take on a flip that is longer than 6 months.
Right.
I would like to, worst case scenario, 6 months from the time it's done, it's purchased to finished, up for sale, and potentially sold, giving myself 40 days to sell the property. And then lastly, I'll transition that into ROI. What's my return that I could see on this property if I go forward?
So you have a bit of a formula then that you would use?
Yeah. So there's a couple formulas. Very common. A lot of people will use what's called the 70% rule, which is you take your ARV, you multiply it by 70%, and you subtract your resale cost or your upgrade cost. And the difference is, because a lot of times when I first started, I would go into a flip and I would say, I'm going to buy it for this amount, this is the budget, this is where I'm going to sell it for, and this is my profit. But I was doing it a bit backwards. What you want to find out is where you should offer on the property for everything to work. So when you take that ARV, that after resale value, you multiply it by 70% and subtract your rehab cost, that number is where you should offer on the property. Now, to open that up a little bit, to explain, the 30% that is thrown away, that isn't multiplied out of the 70%, includes your fixed costs and your profits. I watched a fantastic podcast by Bigger Pockets, I think it was back in 2015, where a gentleman that was on it talked about how he would refer to that formula, but he did it a little differently, because what he found is if you're putting your fixed costs and your profits into one margin, a 30% bracket, it can easily be inflated or deflated artificially. Every property that you're going to go into is going to have a different amount of fixed costs. Some properties have higher taxes. You may be doing a hard money loan for this one and paying a higher percent interest. So what he started doing, and what I like to refer to, is you take your after resale value, you subtract your renovation costs, you subtract your fixed costs, which is important. Your fixed cost is everything. Your realtor fees. You have your fixed costs on the buy, and you have your fixed costs on the sell. Your lawyer fees. Everything like that, your carrying costs. And then what he would do is he would subtract his desired profit. So he was setting that profit up individually. It was already preset, and
Right.
that would dictate where he wants to offer on the property.
And then you would see if that price is in line with what the neighborhood can bear.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
So that's a neat little twist on that, because then you're saying, you know what, I already know what I want to make. I'm not going to compromise this. Will it work?
Exactly. You're not leaving your profit margins up to estimation in the sense of saying, we buy it for this, this is the cost, we sell it for this, this is what I could make. You're saying, this is what I want to make and what I need to make on the property. So by subtracting everything out, this is where I need to buy.
Right. And just one last question on this. Our time is pretty short right now. And we talked about the patience it will take to get that right house, for a calculation like that to work. And with our market, we're in a very strong seller's market. And I think I said something like 35% this morning was the calculation on Snapshot. I'll just take a quick look here. It was 34%, very strong. I mean, you only need to be 20% to be in a seller's market, so it's far beyond that. These homes come up few and far between, and I'm sure some of these homes that are potential flip homes, they're trying to ride on the coattails of the good homes that sold.
Right.
Any advice on that?
Yeah, to the riding the coattails point, I do see that, and whether it's just because there isn't a massive amount of inventory here, so if there's only 2 homes of a similar model in a subdivision, one is done up and one isn't, and there isn't a bunch in between, it doesn't create that gap in the price points. It's tough. I think you just have to be prepared. You have to have everything in line, your pre-approval, everything that you need. If you're doing a joint venture or partnering with everyone, have that deal preset so that the only thing you need to plug in is the property and the price that you're paying, and you run those numbers. And then I just think it's important to have a strong offer and try and get to the property as fast as possible.
Be quick.
Be quick. They do come up.
Yeah.
And I mean, I do see them come up. And I think, it's not surprising where maybe you'll buy a larger amount of inventory in the spring because there's more inventory coming up, less competition than you will in slower months. But you just have to be quick.
Well, Aaron, we're done for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and you'll be back next week.
I will.
And we'll continue on with this. There's a lot of information we haven't gotten to, and Aaron, if somebody's looking for a good realtor, and what's the best way that they can contact you?
They can call me at 905-396-0489, or my email is aaron@aaronfarrow.ca. Even if they just have any questions, I'd love to hear from them.
Great. Any questions on flips and their own investment?
Of course. Design
direction.
ideas, whatever. I'd love to hear what everyone's going on.
And folks, if you didn't get that down, you can always contact me, and I'd be happy to pass along Aaron's contact information. And you can listen next week because Aaron will be back. If you have any questions or comments about anything on today's show, or for any real estate questions, feel free to contact me by emailing dale@dalebryant.ca. I'm an active real estate broker with Royal LePage, Pro Alliance Realty Brokerage. And don't forget to join me next Thursday from 11 a.m. until 12 noon for Reality Realty on Northumberland 89.7 FM, truly local radio. Until next week, folks.
In the middle of our street, our house. In the middle of our street, our house.
A lot of fun.
In the middle of